Welcome to Libraries Today. This program is intended to recognize and highlight the unexpected ways local libraries serve their communities today. I'm your host, Stan Howell. 40 years ago, the West Virginia Library Commission had a vision to create a television studio which would produce high-quality content for all West Virginians. The programming would focus on information, on health, history, community issues, and of course, public libraries. From that vision, the WVLC Library Television Network was born. Now, you may not be aware that the WVLC has a TV studio here in the Culture Center on the Capitol grounds in Charleston. This studio not only produces this program, but over the last 4 decades has produced thousands of high-quality, diverse programs. In fact, the WVLC Library Television Network produces 220 shows of original programming each year. In today's program, we are going to celebrate the 40th anniversary of this remarkable success story. We'll take a look back at how it all started with the people who made it all happen. In 1978, John Calvert began directing, editing, and handling the camera as the Library Television Network began its 40-year journey. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Stan. Glad to be here.
Let's talk about the beginnings of this studio. You were here from the very start. What was it like?
I remember when Fred Glazer hired me.
Fred was the head of the Library Commission at the time.
Yes, he was the head of the Library Commission at the time, and the offices were over on the other side of the Capitol.
Because this building hadn't opened yet.
It wasn't finished yet. Right. It wasn't finished. It was underway, and the plan was to build a studio, a television studio here. I had to wait about 6 months to actually, come here and do the job. So when I came through the door here, the studio was here, the grid was on the ceiling, and there was a cart with a television sitting on top of it in here. And I thought, this is really minimalist television. I had a lot to do. So I went about actually building sets and painting and getting things ready to go.
Somewhere along the line, you had to come up with cameras and microphones and a set.
Right.
How did you mentioned you built the sets yourself.
Right. We actually built the tables that we put the equipment on out of 2x6s and Formica. I mean, everything here was hand built. The sets, the little risers that we have, that some of them look like they're originals in here right now. But we did all that ourselves because we were on a very strict budget. We didn't have much money to spend on this entire operation, and television equipment for the kind of middle-of-the-road professional was very, very expensive at that time.
Were you involved in actually going out and finding cameras and microphones?
There was a budgeted figure for it in the Library Commission's annual budget. We did have to go and look at different options. Fred, myself, and Dave Scholdes, which was an employee with us, traveled to Pittsburgh.
Of course, you had worked at WCHS TV, right. So you were familiar with some of the things that needed to happen.
Oh, sure. I worked first out of college at WCHS. I left CHS and went to WSWP, public station in Beckley. And at that point in time, Beckley didn't have a studio at all. All they had was a production truck. So everything we did there was remote.
So when all this started, what was your vision? What did you want this studio and this network to become?
Fred's vision, and I shared the vision, was that there's a lot to know. And television was the emerging technology to make that happen.
Well, it had to be a little unusual to have a TV studio in a library setting.
Well, I think that was a natural extension of the information delivery that libraries are responsible for. We are a repository for knowledge, like Alexandria's library. And in order to be able to distribute that knowledge or that information out to the public, television was a perfect vehicle for that.
It's one thing to have the set, have the studio, have people to direct and to be in front of the cameras, but somewhere people have to be able to watch it, right? Mm-hmm. So where were people able to access the programming you guys were producing early on?
Well, it was available. It was cataloged as if it were any other piece of information. or creation. It was cataloged here at the Library Commission, and people could come and check it out if they wanted to. Early on, not very many people did because it was all produced on U-matic 3/4-inch tape, and that was not a ubiquitous home type format.
Were you broadcasting the programming anywhere?
Eventually, we did get access to the cable, a live access to cable, and when that happened, things really began to blossom because we were alive. We were a destination. Being here in the Capitol, public television used this studio to do some of their work during legislative session. We sent our television, our shows out to the cable system, and they aired them.
At some point, the studio also started using outside talent to produce shows, not necessarily library shows, but shows on agriculture or shows on history. When did that start?
Gosh, putting a finger on the time that started, I would say probably 2 or 3 years into the development.
So pretty early on.
It was pretty early on. We did some interesting things. We had some very good productions in here. One of them was called Heritage Trunk. It was done by Dolly Sherwood. We worked real close with Archive and History on that. The guys over in the shop over here, Bob Sharif, did a marvelous job. He built a Victorian living room in this place. It was unbelievable. Like a library, wainscoting around the walls. It was great, and Dolly did that in here.
What kind of reception did you get in those early days? What were people's reactions?
Generally speaking, the existence of this facility here and the things that we did were widely accepted and appreciated. There were some who thought it was a duplication of effort, that there didn't need to be a studio and a staff here because we had public television just up the road. Our missions were different, but they were somewhat the same. So there was always an underlying kind of rumble of, are we going to be here next year? Is this going to happen? Are we going to get a budget cut and the whole thing's just going to go away? Fred did a good job of fighting for us in the early days. And that's when most of the pushback occurred. After we established ourselves here, and over the years with Mark coming in and Dave taking over after I left, there was enough in the way of permanence and power, I think, associated with this operation to keep it here as long as it's been here.
When you look back at your days here in the studio, what are your best memories?
Oh, we were just crazy people. We had a motto: if it isn't fun, don't do it. When we needed to be serious, we were very serious. I think there was a lot of production talent around. We weren't afraid to fail. We just wanted to do the best we could with what we had. And it was a great time.
John, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
I enjoyed this. Thank you.
We'll be back with more on Libraries Today after this.
40 years ago, the West Virginia Library Commission had a vision to create a television studio for all West Virginians, providing them with information on state libraries, health, history, community issues, and so much more. The Library Television Network was born. From the West Virginia Library Commission and the Library Television Network, thank you for sharing this journey with us.
The WVLC Library TV Network is celebrating its 40th anniversary. We're taking a look back at some of the people who started it all. Another of the early pioneers with the Library TV Network was Chris Bradley. Chris is now the WVLC Director of Network Services, but he started with the commission right here on the studio floor. Chris, thanks for being with us.
It's good to be here.
So tell me about what it was like when you first started.
Wow. I came in this door in July of '85, and there was a fellow here named Rick Goodwin at the time who was the engineer and other camera guy, whatever. And he sort of led me around, taught me the ropes, how things worked, the on-air playback, and Dave taught me a little bit about directing and camera work and stuff that I hadn't been familiar with. But honestly, the equipment was old and it smelled funny, but everything worked and everything did its job. And it's amazing the stuff that was being done with what they had at the time. It's pretty amazing.
What kind of jobs did you handle?
Well, I did some camera work on the floor camera, and when I first started out, and I did some field recording. Went out and shot some stuff on location. And as the years went by, Dave kind of nurtured me along, and he taught me technical directing and things. And there at the end, I was doing pretty good. I could TD live broadcasts. We did some stuff with Mountain Stage and Van Day and things that were a lot of fun that were live. And I learned a lot. It was a good time. It really was.
You know, programming is the driving force behind any TV studio, and programming hours kept increasing over the years.
Yeah, it was, the popularity of the programming was what was amazing. We started out with a couple hours on Capitol Cable in the afternoon, like 3 to 5, when nobody's home to watch television anyway. But it started catching on. You know, local cable companies started picking it up. St. Albans picked it up. Logan picks them up. Williamson picks them up. Parkersburg started expanding the broadcast day. Then Capitol came back and gave us 3 hours. And then it changed to 12 hours a day. So it just expanded and on and on and on. Now I think they're distributed to cable companies all over the state. It's big footprint these days.
There's some pretty high-profile people that ended up being interviewed over the years on the various shows. Folks like James Earl Jones, John McBride, of course, governors, elected officials. Some pretty big names.
There were, and thanks to me being in the studio, I got to meet most of those people in person, and pretty amazing folks. I got to meet Victor Kayam, the Bremerton Shaver guy that bought the company. That was pretty cool. And of course, Stephen Kuntz, you mentioned,
right?
And a lot of other authors. This list is just too long to go through, but a lot of cool people, a lot of neat times.
So you mentioned some of the pioneering programs that you did, you know, Vandalia Festival. What were some of the other big-time events that were put on over the years?
Well, you know, in the 80s, we were the first people to do the live lottery drawings. The Lottery Commission was looking for somewhere to do the lottery drawings. It just so happened we could get a signal from here to Pittsburgh, so all the stations could pick it up. So we did the lottery drawings. We come here on Saturday evening, set everything up, do the live drawings that lasted all of 1 minute, and pack it up and repeat every Saturday. It was a lot of fun. Those other things, like we did the Van Day gathering live in the 90s, the whole weekend live, starting Friday evening, Saturday, and Sunday. That was a long weekend, but we did some cool stuff, kind of pioneering, live from the Capitol grounds when the technology was just awful, but it worked, and I will never tell anybody how we did that stuff because they'll laugh. So.
When you look back at your time here in the studio, what are the kinds of things that stand out for you?
Well, it's a lot of fun. You know, where else can you get a job that something you like to do and get paid for it? That's pretty neat. And I got to meet a lot of cool people, and I realized that other people who come in and volunteer, they don't get paid for it. A lot of the hosts and volunteers that came in over the years, some of them still come in, even to this day. I think of Sharon King. She still does a lot of programming. Randy Dameron. Randy's been here for years and years and years. Dr. Rashid, still doing a show after probably 25 years. I have to go back and check the dates. But those guys don't get paid to do it, and evidently they love it, or they wouldn't be volunteering their time to do that. And I think they don't get enough appreciation. So thanks, guys, for toughing it out all those years.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. A more recent member of the Library TV Network team is Mike Schock. Mike, thanks for dropping by.
You're welcome.
So tell me about your time with the Library Network.
Well, let's see, I spent about almost 15 years here. When I was signed on, we were still shooting analog.
That had to be a big jump.
Yes, it was, because they had shot analog, I'd say, since the beginning of the studio.
Right.
And so there wasn't a whole lot of changes in technology, really, except like cameras and what type of tape formats. But as soon as digital came about, it's been pretty much warp speed since, yeah.
And then HD?
Yes, HD. Yes, all that was in a period of, I'd say 5 years even when I started.
Yeah, so 35 years,
yeah,
worked one way. In the last 5 years, things have changed dramatically.
Yes, yes, very dramatically. Yes.
So what kind of jobs did you do as part of the network?
Well, I was a videographer. I was also the guy who worked on broken stuff. And
Mr. Fix-It.
Yeah. Was the master programmer for Rent on Air feed. Both when we did analog, like we used to run it live. Like first, multiple blocks during the day, ran the first one live, and then automated. And later we switched to all digital automation, so in charge of programming. And I also helped spec new stuff. So with our budget, within our budgetary guidelines. So.
Well, besides the switch to digital, what other changes did you stand out in your mind over that 15-year period?
I say quality of equipment got better, more affordable price. You had to spend a lot of money to get.
So you said new cameras and.
Yeah.
So how often did you get out of the studio and get out and shoot some things away from the building?
Well, we like one field shoot per show, plus different projects. A few times, 5, 6 times a year. What
are some of the, when you're shooting away from the studio, you have some different challenges.
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of things come into your mind when you think about those days when you're outside shooting?
Controlling the environment.
The weather. Huh?
Yeah, the weather would interrupt the interview. Yeah.
I guess you had to, kind of be light on your feet when you're out there on the road.
Yes.
So when you look back at your days working there, what are your best memories? What are the things that really stand out?
Oh, I say people I work with, getting to meet, dealt with, governors, famous people come through. Got to meet, for example, Sam Huff used to play in the NFL.
Oh, the NFL?
Yeah.
Linebacker with the Redskins and the Giants.
Of course, met my wife here.
That's true.
Yeah, so it was a life-changing experience.
Some good memories then.
Uh-huh.
Well, Mike, thanks for dropping by. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more on the history of the Library Network after this. In the last 4 decades, the Library TV Network has produced thousands of shows and been a major contributor to the growth of public awareness for West Virginia libraries. 2 of the men most responsible for the success of the network are former director Dave Schuldis and current director Mark Lanham. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Dave, you started here in the 1970s. Why don't you tell me what it was like when you first walked through these doors?
My goodness, what an experience it was. I can remember walking through these studio doors and everything was piled in just on a cart. The lighting, the production switcher, even the cameras were all piled right there in a cart. So John and I kind of got together and decided, well, where do we want to put this? Where can we put this? So we moved it all back to the control room and started building sets, started building risers, started building where we wanted our cameras and plots for lighting.
Now, our current set, we have about 3 sets, I believe, here in the studio. How different are they from what they were like when you were here?
Oh, they're considerably different. John and I had to build every set. Luckily, we did get some hand-me-downs from Channel 8. So we did get some sets from Channel 8. But for the majority of the sets here, John and I built and painted.
What were your biggest challenges in those early days?
We were building a studio, a TV studio. This was a new idea and a new concept for a library system. So we had to jump that hurdle and say we were actually helping the library. We were collaborating with them to enhance their book, but we were doing it via tape. The other thing John and I had to face was what type of programming were we going to produce? And it always came back that we really wanted an informational series, something information. So information television was born. So we started asking department heads with state agencies, could we do something with your department? And we got 100% success with people coming over and doing programming for us. And it kind of snowballed from there.
So your challenges primarily dealt with getting things started. Mark, you've been here now for a while.
Yes.
You probably have a different set of challenges.
Yeah.
What are the kind of things you deal with?
Well, we still have the budget challenge. That's always the biggie. We have that. We have keeping the shows going as well. Some of the agencies come and go, and we have issues with them staying, for a certain long time. Some of them have been here for, 400 plus shows. Some of them do 11 shows, and then you have to move on to another one. It's always a juggling match to schedule everybody in, especially when you're doing somewhere around 22 to 25 shows a month, about 220 shows a year. It is a juggling match. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Now, you both touched on programming. And as I understand it, the early days, the programming and the amount of programming you had to have, very different from where we are today.
We decided the main thrust was information. And our programming always had to have a theme of informing the patron viewer.
How many hours did you have to fill in the
I think
early days?
we were on 7 hours the first month or two. So it was a constant fill. We had to fill that time.
Mark, Dave was talking about informational programming. Why don't you explain what the programming is like today?
Well, the programming now is it's still agency based. We try to maintain that as much as possible, but we also deal with local organizations as well. We have volunteers that come in and host shows, and they have to stay within that public information or educational niche that kind of like what Dave and them started. We've just expanded it just out just a little bit more.
How many hours do you fill now?
We fill about 72 hours a week.
What is the job of a network director? David?
Not only directing the programming on camera, but directing the department itself, with staff meetings, with production meetings, with program hosts, with program guests.
Over your 21 years, how did your role change?
My concept was we wanted to complement books in the library with videotapes. That was a hard sell for librarians, for the most part. And so what I did, I would say we could enhance this if a patron wanted to see a particular program or a particular series. We could help develop that for you, for that patron, for that library. So it kept evolving. I wanted to go from just the books on the shelf in the library to our developing our own channel here in Charleston. Branch that channel here in Charleston to other cable outlets throughout the state. And we were successful in doing that.
Mark, in addition to regular programming that Dave and you have talked about, the studio also handles special programming for the governor, for First Lady. Can you talk a little bit about some of the special programming you do?
Yes, as you mentioned with the governor's office, we're at his beck and call. If he needs us to go and shoot a press conference or shoot an event that he's at, we will go and shoot an event and put that together for them in any format that they want that in. We also do special productions for the agencies, for the organizations come to us and they want a video produced for either the web, for use to pass around or hand out in a hard format, and we can produce those as well, either here in the studio or out on location, and give that to them in several different media forms.
Dave, what are the kind of things that stick with you most after all these years when you look back?
Oh my goodness. The people that I ran into, the people that I was blessed to work with, the creative people that came into mine, and we would sit down, and I would always sit down with them in a production meeting and say, what if we could do this? That was always my mantra. What if? And they would say, well, Dave, we could do this, this, this. So that was 20-some years worth of beautiful memories of people coming in, creative minds working, and coming up with ideas about programming, about ideas and how-tos and so on and so forth. If I had one person that comes to mind that really set this apart and that really, really saved the Library Commission channel, would be Sharon King. Sharon King went above and beyond helping the Library Commission with developing programmings and with developing the structure and the stability of this service of the library.
Mark, we've been talking about the past.
Mm-hmm.
What is your vision for the future for the Library Commission network?
Well, expansion as always. I'd like to go farther out and make sure that more people see what we're doing. One of the things we'd like to do is the facility is not full HD yet. We'd like to get the equipment to step that forward.
I would like to say that the future is far and beyond what the Library Commission hopes to have. This is going to be what Mark is going to be developing. It's going to be a beautiful system. If I ever could say anything great about Mark and extending this and carrying this torch on, it would be high praises to Mark. He undoubtedly has gotten the torch and carried it forward, and look at this place. It is beautiful.
Dave, Mark, thanks to both of you for being here today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have some final thoughts on 40 years of the Library TV network after this. It's been a remarkable run for the WVLC Library TV network. 40 years ago, it all started with an empty room. It had to be filled with cameras, lighting, a master control board, microphones, sets, and people. The pioneers of this network had to start from scratch, and they managed to create a legacy of quality TV for the libraries and people of West Virginia. And by the way, you can watch the current lineup of shows any time of the day on the network's YouTube channel. I'd like to thank my guests for being on today's show, former Library TV network pioneers John Calvert, Dave Schuldis, Chris Spradling, and Mike Schock, as well as the network's current director and the man who makes this show and many others possible, Mark Lanham. I'm Stan Howell from the WVLC studio. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Libraries Today.